Hidden behind rows of meticulously trimmed hedges, Arbor Crest Estates looked like the quintessential American suburb. Pristine sidewalks, spacious driveways, and neatly landscaped front gardens. From afar, the houses seemed as if they were painted in a uniform palette of beige, taupe, and ivory. Every detail carefully regulated by the local homeowners association. But behind that orderly veneer lay a tapestry of different personalities. Some residents reveled in the HOA's efforts, believing it kept the neighborhood beautiful and property values high. Others found the unspoken social rules stifling, especially when enforced by the loudest, most domineering member of the HOA, Rachel Farnell, whom everyone half-jokingly referred to as Karen. Rachel was in her mid-50s, always impeccably dressed in pastel suits, carrying a clipboard with lists of perceived neighborhood infractions. She had a particular way of speaking, clipped, precise, and dripping with condescension. Rachel had an uncanny ability to pop up when least wanted, scanning lawns for unauthorized garden gnomes or kids' bicycles parked too close to a neighbor's walkway. The trouble was, once Rachel fixated on something, she wouldn't let go. She'd pester the HOA board with emails, phone calls, and official complaints until the perceived problem was stamped out or forcibly removed. More often than not, residents gave in to avoid her relentless harassment. The only silver lining was that Rachel, for all her meddlesome behavior, did care, in her own way, about the community's reputation. She organized block parties with strict rules on decorations, published a monthly newsletter featuring more warnings than celebrations, and believed she was the self-appointed guardian of Arbor Crest standards. It was that same invasive zeal that would soon spark an uproar. No one could have guessed that a few teenagers trying to do good for the local community would become the target of Rachel's wrath, nor that her sabotage would ironically bring neighbors closer in a way few had anticipated. Kayla Johnson, a bright-eyed high school sophomore, dreamed of raising money for her school's music program. State budget cuts had stripped many extracurriculars of funding, and Kayla, who played the trumpet, worried that the band's resources would dwindle further. Chatting with her close friends, she proposed a classic fundraiser, a weekend car wash in the neighborhood's community parking lot. The plan was simple. She'd recruit fellow band members, and any sports teams wanted to chip in. They'd set up a few stations to rinse, soap, and dry cars, charging a reasonable fee. The money raised would go toward new instruments, sheet music, and other supplies that helped keep their music program afloat. Word spread quickly among the teens in Arbor Crest. Diego, a star soccer player, saw the car wash as an opportunity to raise funds not just for the band, but for his team's aging equipment. He offered to bring friends from the soccer squad to help with the soaping and rinsing. Soon, a small but enthusiastic group formed, combining forces to attract a broader audience and increase donations. They needed a venue, and the best place seemed to be a spacious corner of the community clubhouse parking lot, which was usually empty on weekends. Kayla figured it would be a prime spot. Residents coming in or out could easily stop by for a quick wash, and the kids wouldn't disrupt too much traffic. Kayla's mother, Cynthia Johnson, encouraged the plan. She promised to contact the HOA to make sure everything was official. After all, Cynthia didn't want the kids to get in trouble for unauthorized activities on HOA property. She also knew that certain members, most notably Rachel Farnell, tended to cause a stir if anything happened without explicit approval. Cynthia sent an email detailing the proposal to the HOA board, which was chaired by a jovial retiree named Mr. Samuels. He was generally open to fundraising events and believed in fostering a sense of community. He forwarded the request to the rest of the board members for a vote. Predictably, Rachel responded swiftly. While we appreciate the spirit of charity, we must ensure no soapy water or debris overflows onto residents' properties or the public street. We also must confirm that participants maintain the clubhouse grounds properly. I have concerns about potential harm to landscaping and water waste. I'll withhold my full support until these questions are addressed. Still, the majority of the board looked favorably upon the fundraiser. A few conditions were set. The teens had to clean up thoroughly, manage water usage responsibly, and ensure that no excessive noise or litter would bother residents. With those caveats, the car wash was approved for the upcoming Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Kayla and her friends celebrated, planning colorful posters, scheduling time slots, and coordinating soap and towels. Little did they know, one person's grudging acceptance concealed a growing determination to find fault in everything they did. All week leading up to the car wash, Rachel walked around Arbor Crest with the air of someone who suspected wrongdoing at every corner. More than once, neighbors overheard her murmuring about unauthorized water usage and soap runoff. She was seen snapping photos of the community clubhouse parking lot, presumably trying to capture any potential hazards or rule violations. In truth, Rachel had a personal gripe with such fundraisers. She believed they brought unnecessary commotion into what should be a tidy, tranquil neighborhood. She also worried that the soap and water might run downhill into her yard a block away. Never mind that the clubhouse was on the opposite end, separated by multiple houses and a wide street. Midweek, she caught Kayla taping up a bright poster near the clubhouse gate. It read, "Saturday Fundraiser Car Wash. Support our school. 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Rachel couldn't resist approaching, arms folded. "Young lady," she began, voice tinged with disapproval, "I hope you know that these posters are only allowed on designated notice boards. Random signage can be considered defacement of community property." Startled, Kayla fumbled with the tape. I asked the HOA board, and Mr. Samuels said we could advertise the event near the clubhouse. We're just letting neighbors know." Rachel let out a thin, dismissive laugh. "Mr. Samuels should have told you to place the poster on the official bulletin board inside the clubhouse, not on a gate. Posters on gates are unsightly. Take it down, please." With a sigh, Kayla peeled away the tape. She mustered a polite nod, then retreated, clutching her poster. That evening, Kayla informed her mom, Cynthia, about the incident. Cynthia shook her head in exasperation. "Don't worry," she said. "We'll simply put the signs on the approved bulletin board and maybe use word of mouth to get the word out. Rachel can't cancel the event now. The rest of the board already approved it." Still, the run-in foreshadowed what was to come. Rachel wasn't content merely to enforce small rules. She was prepared to pounce on any slip-up that might justify shutting the fundraiser down. The anticipated Saturday arrived with clear blue skies and a warm sun, perfect weather for a car wash. By 9:30 a.m., Kayla, Diego, and a half-dozen other teens had gathered in the clubhouse parking lot, setting up buckets, sponges, hoses, and soap. Several parents were there, too, supervising and helping unload supplies from the trunks of their cars. Cynthia organized the main supply table, which held bottled water for volunteers, extra towels, and a lockbox for donations. A few fold-out chairs and umbrellas provided shade for the teens when they needed a quick rest. Meanwhile, music from a portable speaker played softly, just enough to create a cheerful atmosphere without disturbing nearby homes. At precisely 10 a.m., the first customer pulled up, a neighbor who'd heard about the fundraiser and wanted to support the kids. The teens sprang into action, rinsing the car, scrubbing gently with eco-friendly soap, and then rinsing again. The entire process took about 10 minutes, and the neighbor thanked them warmly, dropping a generous donation into the box. Within the hour, a small line of cars formed at the makeshift entrance to the parking lot. Word seemed to have spread quickly, through social media, texts, or maybe the local residents group chat. The energy was high, and the teens developed a smooth system. 2 or 3 handled the initial rinse, a couple tackled the soaping and scrubbing, and the rest took turns drying. Diego's soccer friends added an element of fun by juggling sponges and occasionally playfully spraying each other, to the mild amusement of onlookers. From a distance, however, another figure lurked. Rachel Farnell stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, scanning the scene like a hawk on the lookout for potential wrongdoing. She occasionally approached cars waiting in line to hand out printed leaflets titled "Environmental Concerns About Car Washes." Most drivers politely declined or rolled up their windows, leaving Rachel fuming. Eventually, Rachel marched up to Cynthia, her voice laced with that now familiar disapproval. "There's an awful lot of soapy water running into the storm drain," she announced. Are you sure you're using the correct drainage protocols? Cynthia smiled calmly. We have an agreement with the city. We're using biodegradable soap, and we're directing most of the runoff into the grassy areas. We have containment booms as well, right there. She pointed to the small barriers the teens had placed to divert the water. The city's guidelines say this is acceptable for a one-day fundraiser. Rachel pressed her lips together, eyeing the inflatable barriers the teens had laid out. Oomph, she finally said, turning away to resume her silent watch. For the moment, she had no grounds to demand an immediate stop. But behind that cold stare, her mind was already churning, seeking another angle of attack. The car wash continued through midday with minimal issues. A mini rush came around lunchtime as families running errands or heading to the grocery store dropped by for a quick wash. Some people, touched by the teens' energy and polite service, contributed extra, turning a $5 wash into a $10 or even $20 donation. Kayla's excitement grew each time she heard the clink of coins and the rustle of bills in the donation box. Diego's teammates, too, were thrilled at how quickly their portion of the fund was adding up. They joked about how they might finally replace their worn-out soccer nets if the day kept going this well. Through it all, Rachel never strayed far. She paced back and forth along the sidewalk, occasionally snapping photos with her smartphone. She did not mask her contempt, especially whenever a stray bubble drifted onto the grass or a volunteer took a short water break. Around 2 p.m., the teens decided to rotate shifts. Some needed a quick snack, others needed a bathroom break in the clubhouse. For a brief 5-minute window, the hustle around the main hose station died down. A few teens were still in the parking lot, but they were over by the donation table, chatting with a neighbor. In that scant window of time, Rachel saw her opportunity. The brand-new, extra-long garden hose, hooked up to the clubhouse's outdoor spigot, was coiled in a neat pile next to the main rinse station. Rachel glanced left and right, confirming no one was watching. She walked briskly toward it, crouched down, and produced a small pocket utility blade from her purse. Without hesitation, she cut a jagged line through the thick rubber. Water spurted from the initial gash, drenching her shoes, but she didn't flinch. She made a second slice, ensuring the hose was effectively destroyed. Then, dropping the severed section in the coil, she rose, stepping back as if nothing had happened. Even Rachel felt a flutter of anxiety as she scanned the area, but no one seemed to notice. Most of the teens were busy with conversation or behind cars, and the parents were checking supplies near the clubhouse doors. She tucked the blade back into her purse and strode away, heart pounding, sure she had just halted the entire operation. Moments later, Kayla returned from the clubhouse restrooms. She spotted a new car arriving for a wash, a red SUV that looked particularly dusty from a recent trip out of town. Kayla enthusiastically grabbed the hose, ready to rinse the vehicle. She twisted the spigot handle. Nothing. A sudden spray of water erupted near her feet, squirting out from a ragged tear in the hose. Gasping, Kayla jumped back. She peered down in horror, realizing the hose was ruined. "Hey," she called out, waving Diego and a few others over. "Guys, the hose is cut." Diego rushed over, confusion etched on his face. He knelt to inspect the deep slice. "This is no accident," he muttered. "Someone cut it on purpose." Instantly, the teens began to speculate. Could it have snagged on something? Could a car have run it over and split it? No, the damage was too clean, too precise. Once they began suspecting sabotage, there was only one person who came to mind: Rachel Farnell. Cynthia hurried over, her expression shifting from shock to anger as she examined the hose. "I can't believe this. We have customers waiting, and we don't have a spare hose." In the space of minutes, the scene descended into chaos. Cars waiting for a wash inched forward, wondering why nothing was happening. A few volunteers tried to reassure them, explaining they'd handle the situation quickly. But the tension was palpable. Without a working hose, the entire operation would grind to a halt. Rachel hovered on the sidewalk, feigning ignorance. When she noticed the group's agitation, she strolled closer, wearing a mask of concern. "Oh dear, is there a problem?" she asked, batting her eyelashes in mock innocence. Cynthia took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. "The hose has been cut," she said curtly. Rachel's eyebrows arched. How terrible. Perhaps it was just old and brittle. No one bought her feigned sympathy. Still, they had no proof, not yet, that Rachel had wielded the knife. Furious, but determined not to cause a public shouting match, Cynthia forced a polite nod. "We'll figure something out." Rachel responded with a tight smile, turned on her heel, and meandered away, her posture radiating smug satisfaction. The teens refused to let one malicious act ruin the day. Rather than pack up and surrender, they sprang into problem-solving mode. They tried patching the hose with duct tape and rubber sealant, but the gash was too large and the water pressure too high. Within minutes, water seeped through and the patch peeled off. Next, they considered borrowing a neighbor's hose. However, the clubhouse spigot was located a good distance away from the main wash area, and they needed a special industrial-length hose to reach all the cars. Typical garden hoses were shorter, and splicing multiple hoses together risked leaks or weak water flow. As frustration mounted, parents joined in on the brainstorming. Mrs. Lee, whose daughter was in the band, recalled that the local garden supply store sold heavy-duty hoses but was at least a 20-minute drive away. Even if someone dashed there, they need to hope the store had the right type in stock and that it would attach properly to the clubhouse spigot. Meanwhile, customers in line grew restless. Some decided to leave, disappointed but sympathetic. Others waited, watching the teens scurry about. A sense of urgency filled the parking lot as the donation box remained idle. "We can't lose momentum," Kayla lamented, wringing her hands. "We've worked too hard for this." Diego gritted his teeth. "We'll find a fix," he said firmly. "It's not over yet." Just when the group was on the verge of panicking, an unexpected savior arrived in the form of Mr. Gutierrez, a local parent who oversaw the high school's booster club. Having heard about the fiasco, he walked briskly towards Cynthia, phone in hand. "I've got a cousin who manages a construction rental business," Mr. Gutierrez explained. "He can loan us a small water tank truck for the day if we cover the mileage and some fees. We'll park it right here. We can fill buckets directly from the truck spout and keep washing. No need for the clubhouse hose at all." The teens exchanged wide-eyed looks of hope. A water tank truck would be bigger and more expensive than a mere hose, but if it saved the fundraiser, it might be worth it. Cynthia nodded. "Let's do it. We can use the funds we've raised so far to cover the rental. Or I can foot the bill for now, and we'll sort it out later." A quick phone call confirmed that the truck was available. Within an hour, a bright white water tank truck rumbled into the parking lot, drawing curious stares from passersby. The driver backed it into the corner, set the brakes, and unrolled a short dispensing hose. The teens grinned. They could fill their buckets from the truck spigot, carry them over to the cars, and rinse using smaller handheld sprayers if needed. No, it wasn't as convenient as a direct hose connection, but it would work. With renewed determination, the teens reorganized. One group was stationed at the truck, filling buckets and caddies. Another group handled scrubbing, while others rinsed and dried. The water tank solution wasn't perfect. It meant more heavy lifting and slower output, but at least they were back in business. Word spread about the sabotage and the teens' creative workaround. Intrigued by the drama, more community members began showing up, either to see the water truck in action or to demonstrate solidarity. Some residents who had never planned to get their cars washed dropped by with donations in hand, remarking, "We heard someone try to ruin your fundraiser, so we wanted to support you." Meanwhile, the kids managed to keep a celebratory atmosphere. They laughed off the unexpected challenge, calling themselves the Bucket Brigade, and even started singing little chants while scrubbing cars. A few parents took turns manning the donation station, politely explaining the day's story to new arrivals. Rachel, however, hovered nearby, her expression shifting from smug to perturbed. She had fully expected the sabotage to end the fundraiser prematurely. Now, instead of going home in defeat, the teens were drawing even bigger crowds. And the bigger the crowd, the more publicly Rachel's sabotage would be whispered about. Neighbors began to trade knowing glances in her presence. Some confronted her directly, saying, "If you did this, that's low even for you." Of course, she feigned innocence, but it was hard to keep up the act under so many suspicious gazes. By late afternoon, the car wash reached a new peak. Even though the teens were tired, the line of cars was steady. The parents organized quick breaks and shifts, keeping everyone hydrated and fed. The driver of the tank truck agreed to stay until 5 p.m., which was more than enough time for the fundraiser's needs. As the sun dipped lower, a sense of triumph rippled through the group. Not only had they overcome the hose-cutting fiasco, but they were on track to exceed their initial fundraising goals. Kayla felt both exhausted and elated. She couldn't wait to count the final tally. By Sunday morning, word about the dramatic fundraiser had spread throughout Arbor Crest Estates and beyond. Photos circulated on social media. Pictures of the teens joyfully washing cars next to a hulking water tank truck or holding up the severed hose as evidence of sabotage. People were quick to speculate about the saboteur. The name on everyone's lips, of course, was Rachel Farnell. Though no one had witnessed her slicing the hose, her open hostility toward the event and her suspicious presence on the scene made her the prime suspect. Some neighbors even claimed to see her crouched near the rinse station earlier in the day, though no one had captured it on video. The discussion turned fierce on Arbor Crest Community Forum. Many residents expressed outrage. Who would sabotage kids raising money for schools? I always knew Rachel was too meddlesome, but this is a new low. If she hates soap in the drain so much, maybe she should just stay inside. Others tried to stay neutral, noting the lack of ironclad proof. A couple of Rachel's friends, though there were precious few left, jumped to her defense, insisting she was being unfairly maligned. But the tide of public opinion clearly favored the fundraiser's cause. Within days, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. The sabotage had cast the neighborhood in a negative light. Mr. Samuels, the HOA president, wanted to address the matter head-on. "We must maintain a reputation for supporting community initiatives," he said in an email. "And if someone is vandalizing property, that's a serious offense." Rachel, usually first to jump at the chance to attend an HOA meeting, arrived looking uncharacteristically tense. Her usual polished composure showed cracks, deeper frown lines, a jitteriness in her movements. She took her seat at the board table, crossing her arms defensively. Families from a fundraiser showed up in force, along with numerous other neighbors who'd heard the rumors. The meeting room buzzed with anticipation. Mr. Samuels banged his gavel, and the crowd hushed. "We're here to discuss the incident at the student car wash fundraiser," he began. "Specifically, the matter of the severed hose and the possible vandalism." Cynthia Johnson stood, describing the day's events in detail. The successful start, the unexpected sabotage, and the eventual arrival of the water tank truck. Kayla held up the cut hose so everyone could see the sharp, deliberate slice. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Mr. Samuels shook his head gravely. "This is unacceptable. We support philanthropic efforts within reason, and the HOA board did grant permission for the event." He turned to Rachel, who sat stone-faced. "Miss Farnell, you were present for most of the day. Did you witness anything suspicious?" Rachel cleared her throat, leaning into the microphone. "I was there purely in a supervisory capacity, ensuring no rules were broken. I didn't see anyone tampering with the hose. It's possible it tore from overuse or some other mechanical failure." A chorus of groans and whispered remarks filled the room. The boldness of such a denial infuriated many in the audience. "But this cut is extremely clean," Mr. Samuels countered, holding up a photograph of the slash. "It looks intentional. Are you certain you saw nothing?" Rachel's eyes flicked to the crowd, many of whom stared daggers at her. "I saw people stepping on the hose, dragging it around corners. Who knows?" she replied, voice wavering only slightly. With no eyewitness or camera footage, the board couldn't formally charge Rachel with vandalism. But the tension was undeniable. Eventually, Mr. Samuels promised that the HOA would reimburse the cost of a new hose for the community clubhouse and offered a public apology to the teens for any distress caused by the sabotage. Though the official meeting concluded without naming Rachel as the culprit, the court of public opinion had already rendered its verdict. Despite the ugly sabotage, the final tally from the car wash was impressive. The teens raised 40% more than their initial target. Thanks to the unexpected publicity, people had poured in from the surrounding neighborhoods, eager to help. Kayla and the other band members celebrated by ordering pizza and tallying the money, thrilled at what they could now purchase for their programs. Diego's soccer team, too, planned to replace its battered nets and allocate funds for new training equipment. In the days after the event, Cynthia Johnson received emails and phone calls from neighbors still wanting to donate. Even a local news channel showed mild interest, mentioning the story in a short segment about community fundraisers. The newscaster noted, with a hint of irony, sabotage may have backfired, resulting in greater publicity for these determined teens. Sensing this groundswell of support, Mr. Samuels and a few other HOA members suggested building on the momentum. They proposed turning next month's previously scheduled community social into a larger event. A block party and mini fundraiser rolled into one. The idea was to highlight philanthropic causes, encouraging other local student groups or charitable clubs to set up booths. Kayla and Diego loved the concept. They could reintroduce a car wash station, this time with proper equipment and a new, sabotage-proof setup. Perhaps they could even add live music performed by the high school jazz ensemble, allowing Kayla and her bandmates to show off their skills. The board voted overwhelmingly in favor, deciding to allocate a portion of HOA funds to help with decorations, security, and publicity. They dubbed it the Arbor Crest Community Cares Day. Rachel, notably, voted against. She cited concerns about noise, potential litter, and excessive foot traffic. But her single-nay vote was overshadowed by the enthusiasm of the majority. There would be a grand fundraiser next month, one that threatened to overshadow any semblance of peace Rachel might have clung to. In the weeks leading up to Arbor Crest Community Cares Day, colorful flyers appeared in mailboxes, local businesses, and on the official clubhouse bulletin board. They advertised a day of fun, food trucks, a small craft fair, music performances, and a repeat of the now-famous teen car wash. The entire neighborhood buzzed with anticipation. Rachel seethed. She felt powerless. Everyone seemed to be ignoring her protestations about property values, noise ordinances, and environmental hazards. She tried to send mass emails to the HOA mailing list, warning of soap floods and damage to the grass, but few paid attention. Some even labeled her emails as spam, filtering them out altogether. Desperate, she considered filing an official complaint with the local city council, claiming the event would violate water conservation rules. But the city had already given permission for the original car wash, and a new event promised similarly responsible practices. Her complaint went nowhere. Days before the big event, Rachel confronted Mr. Samuels outside the clubhouse. "You're turning this neighborhood into a circus," she snapped. "Mr. Samuels calmly replied, "We're building community. If you have legitimate concerns, please bring them to the board meeting. Otherwise, I'd urge you to let your neighbors enjoy themselves." For once, Rachel had no retort. She glared at him, her frustration palpable, then stomped away. Still, those who knew Rachel suspected she wouldn't go down quietly. With her brand of single-minded tenacity, a last-ditch scheme was likely brewing. Many worried she might sabotage something else: electrical cords, signage, or the new hose. The teens, remembering the fiasco, prepared for potential mishaps. They even set up cameras around the event area, ensuring any mischief would be caught on tape. The big day arrived. Tents popped up early in the morning. The food trucks rolled in, music stands were assembled, and volunteers decorated the parking lot with bright balloons and banners. Kayla's band set up a small stage. Diego and the soccer players staked out the car wash station, this time with 2 brand-new industrial hoses, courtesy of the HOA. On top of that, they still had the contact for renting the water tank truck if needed. Rachel, lurking behind her blinds, watched the preparations. Her brow furrowed as she surveyed the joyful, bustling scene. The street outside her house filled with parked cars and families walking toward the clubhouse. She felt a boiling resentment in her chest. The entire community was celebrating something she had tried to quash, and they were about to have their biggest success yet. As the morning gave way to afternoon, The Arborcrest Community Cares Day was in full swing. The parking lot teemed with neighbors sampling funnel cakes, browsing homemade crafts, and listening to the high school band's upbeat tunes. Children ran around with painted faces, giggling happily, and local charities set up booths to share information about their causes. The car wash station quickly became a centerpiece of attention. A steady line of vehicles formed, and the teens, now well-practiced, operated smoothly. The brand-new hoses worked flawlessly, and a few parents kept watchful eyes to ensure no suspicious figure tried to slice them again. Midway through the event, to everyone's surprise, Rachel emerged from her home. She walked toward the festivities, expression guarded. Some suspected she had come to create a scene, possibly to sabotage something else or stage a dramatic protest. But as she approached, her usual scowl softened ever so slightly. Spotting Mr. Samuels near the food truck area, she hesitated, then cleared her throat. "Where's the main donation booth?" she asked, voice subdued. Mr. Samuels blinked. "Just over there, in front of the clubhouse steps." Rachel nodded, heading in that direction. A few people recognized her and tensed, expecting trouble. But Rachel simply walked up to the donation box, rummaged in her purse, and placed a folded check inside. With that, she turned and left, not speaking a word to anyone. Word spread quickly. Rachel Farnell, so-called Karen, infamous for meddling, had just contributed to the fundraiser. Some speculated she did it purely for appearances to ward off accusations of sabotage. Others wondered if, beneath her officious facade, she felt remorse and wanted a share in the goodwill blossoming around her. No matter the reason, it was a moment that left many stunned. And it marked the final turn in a saga that had once revolved around her hostility. The day proceeded with unbridled success. Record donations, a lively atmosphere, and a renewed sense of unity among neighbors. By early evening, as the last cars rolled away and the booths packed up, Kayla announced that the combined fund from the day far exceeded what they had raised at the original wash. The music program and the soccer team would be well supported for the coming year. Other charities reported similarly impressive donations. In a twist of fate, Rachel's sabotage had ironically elevated the fundraiser's profile. The story of the severed hose and the teens' subsequent resilience had captured the neighborhood's imagination, drawing more participants and more empathy. What began as an attempt to quash a simple car wash ended in a community-wide celebration that overshadowed the negativity once and for all. In the following weeks, Arborcrest Estates settled back into its usual quiet rhythms. Residents mowing lawns, kids cycling on the sidewalks, the occasional porch get-together in the evening. Yet the memory of the sabotage and the grand event that grew from it remained fresh in everyone's minds. The band program at Kayla's school soon boasted new instruments and better practice facilities. Diego's soccer team unveiled gleaming nets and fresh training cones at their next home game, proudly crediting the generosity of Arborcrest. Several local charities that had set up booths at Community Cares Day were able to expand their services. And Rachel, forever nicknamed Karen, in whispered jokes, found her influence waning. Neighbors who once tiptoed around her complaints now greeted her with polite indifference or outright defiance if she tried to cite obscure HOA rules. Even the HOA board, which had once indulged her nitpicking, became stricter with her demands for sanctions against trivial violations. Ironically, the only lingering question was the size of the check she had dropped into the donation box. Nobody outside the counting committee knew the exact amount, but rumor held it was more than a token few dollars. Maybe it was guilt money, or maybe Rachel simply didn't want to be the only person in the neighborhood who failed to donate. Some speculated that it was her grudging way of atoning for sabotage she refused to publicly admit. Regardless, the final outcome spoke for itself. By cutting that hose, Rachel Farnell had unintentionally poured fuel on the fire of community spirit, proving that sometimes an act of malice can be turned into a rallying point for a neighborhood's kindness. In time, the teens who spearheaded the fundraisers would graduate, move on to college or careers, and share the story of their improbable triumph. They'd recall how a so-called Karen tried to ruin their charitable event, but ended up making it bigger and better than anyone could have imagined. And whenever the soap bubbles floated in the sunlight, drifting harmlessly away, those in Arbor Crest Estates would remember a day when adversity turned into unity, all thanks to a single sabotaged hose.